Hey, before we do anything else, we have to thank our sponsors, Smile Traveller, who have not only sent me to Barbados, which is very lovely, but also decked me out in this extremely fashionable cap.
Yeah, no, Smile aren't just good at making George look good, they're also specialists in worldwide sports travel. And this winter, they'll be taking England fans to the Caribbean for an exciting white ball series. Hello and welcome to another edition of Ask George, as we look back on a chaotic weekend in the men's T20 World Cup with our chief correspondent, George Dobell, who is hopscotching around the Caribbean like a toddler, like a cricketing toddler that you are. George, how was what was a frenetic day where England secured their berth in the Super Eights and Scotland went out after losing to Australia?
Nerve-wracking. It really was nerve-wracking. Not least, I thought I was going to have to come home. I mean, there were several times on that day when it looked as if England were going to be knocked out. Not least when it was raining. I mean, it rained a lot in Antigua. For what it's worth, my hotel room flooded. I mean, properly, and the pitch
are the two things
took
related?
so much water. Well, I guess it's quite a small island and there's sea very close by. So, the fact that it rained a lot everywhere, just to give you an example of how wet it was. So there were times when it couldn't have rained any harder, and there didn't seem to be any super stoppers at the ground. Certainly, we didn't see any, and if they had any, you would think there'd be an operation. But anyway, it was so sandy there that the rain went straight through, and as soon as they had a chance, they played. Well, I say that. Did you notice they still did the anthems and had kids unfurling huge flags? The game's mad now.
It is.
I mean, you could see there was more rain coming, and it did indeed come again. And it rained again straight after, by the way. The journey home, we had the wipers on and what have you. And it was, it seems madness to still go all through that. As I said on Twitter, no one would have gone home saying, yeah, we didn't see a game, but we did see some kids holding a huge flag.
I've got a friend who, even with his name being called at the airport by his plane for which he is late, will still go to buy a bottle of water just because he needs one. It's cricket's equivalent, isn't it? They're to a deadline, but we've still got time. We've still got time for this.
Yeah, although I have to say, on planes, this is basically what happens with planes. And if anyone who ever takes a train from Euston Station in particular, you're told by whoever works there, by the staff. We had a delay yesterday in Barbados, so you're told by the staff, just sit patiently, just be patient, just will you just be patient? And then the plane's about to go. We're going in 5 minutes. We're going. Everything is, the onus is always on the passenger. Anyway, Euston's terrible. It's a terrible place. This, however, St. Lucia's lovely. I mean, it's crazy nice. England, by the way, just going back to that, it turns out, so they were trying to watch the game, and it looked as if Scotland were going to beat Australia. And it got too painful for some of them to watch, apparently. I mean, Joss Butler had to leave. He couldn't watch it. So I think they found it genuinely very tense. And you think, what's on it for some of these guys? I mean, do Matthew Mott and Joss Butler keep their jobs if that game had gone to Scotland? I don't know. I wouldn't have been pushing for a change, personally. But it would have happened, wouldn't it? There would have been media pressure, I think, on Matthew Mott in particular. So, these tiny margins are hugely important to individuals. England could go on and win the World Cup. Yeah, they could.
The bloody media. Anyway, let's get to our readers' questions, and we'll start with Stephen. And he asks, looking back on those two games, considering England and Scotland's performances against Australia, should England be delighted that the opening group game was rained off?
I do see where you're coming from, and lots of people will say yes. I don't know. I don't think really we can dispute the fact that a point each was fair enough, can we? I mean, you can't honestly tell me you know with any certainty who was going to win that game. For what it's worth, at the moment it happened, I thought England were the more relieved of the sides to get a point. But, you saw how they batted a couple of days ago. I think they scored 40 in 2 overs at one stage. You saw what did Australia get? 90 in 6 or 7 overs. in the last 6 or 7 against Scotland. Sides can go really, really fast. And I thought actually the wicket in Barbados was probably better than the wicket in Antigua. So England feel they would have won it. Scotland might well feel they would have won it. You've just got to share the point, haven't you? And it would have been a bit unsatisfactory for either side to go out because of it. But it did happen to Australia in the previous World Cup, their own World Cup. You remember they lost to New Zealand. Then the rain forced an abandonment in their game against England. They weren't able to make up the deficit. It's not really a very satisfactory scheduling of this tournament, but it's not going to get any better. In 2028, it's scheduled in Australia and New Zealand in October. October in New Zealand is not summer, really. Certainly not down south. So I don't think they'll be able to play in Christchurch, Dunedin, or even Wellington.
Nikhil asks, looking back to that game, the Namibian game, could we have had a closer game had Namibia gone berserk in the first 5 or 6 overs? Maybe hidden underneath that question is whether David Wiese should have either opened or one of the openers should have been retired out earlier.
Maybe. I mean, David Wiese isn't an opener and doesn't like opening. He's 39 and perhaps is not about to learn new tricks. It's not like Scotland weren't trying to score quickly. I mean, the pitch was very difficult. Yeah, it was damp and the ball was gripping. Johnny Bairstow said it was taking divots out of the surface. And I think you saw in the first over of the England innings, Phil Sort and Joss Butler played and missed four times in the first over and mishit one of the other ones. So it was really difficult. And then you got Reece Topley coming in bowling, 6'8", left arm, getting some movement off the wicket. It's not like they weren't trying. And actually, a lot of Wiese's runs came in a single over off Adil Rashid, who he took on. And so it's a very different challenge for him at that stage. And they did fall 40-odd short. So, it's not like they weren't trying. I think you've always got to give the opposition a bit of credit. Taking on Jofra, and Reece Topley with the new ball, I think is quite hard.
Just a word on David Wiese. I think he mentioned that he's potentially entering international retirement. Sam Keir's done a really, really good piece with David on David in the new edition of the Cricketer magazine. We should absolutely hype up a really nice piece in that new edition. Let's move on to our next question. And Sushant asks, was it a case from an England perspective of absolutely spot on in selection, considering the conditions and the match situation? What was your sense in terms of how the team changed with how the match situation, the play conditions changed, George?
Well, they wanted to play an extra seamer, didn't they? And was it spot on? I mean, they won. When they were whatever for 2 after 2 or 3 overs, it didn't look terribly clever, did it? I mean, they could have been a batter short. But Harry Brook played really, really well. And that was interesting, I think, because he timed the ball. I know other people got a few runs, Wiese and Moen and what have you, Johnny Bairstow. But Harry Brook was the only one to manage to time the ball on a really difficult wicket. And I thought he looked a very high-class player, to be honest. And the sort of player that maybe is a wee bit wasted at 5. Generally, he's been at 5. So I think he could bat at 3. But I don't know, because you're never judging selection just on what happens in one game. What if, for example, Will Jacks now feels a bit unsettled in the side? What if he feels he's playing for his place and can't bat with the same freedom? So I'm not saying he does feel that, but you have to take that into account. So I thought they got the bowling about right, actually. You saw that Adil Rashid was getting super amounts of turn, but it did give the batters an opportunity. And there were times when the Wiese himself was bowling Trumpelman when batting looked very, very difficult on that wicket. So, look, they won. They did the job. They were in quite a tricky position before those last 2 games. Obviously, they're not against the strongest sides in the world, but it's still got to be done. What did they win that game against Oman in? The chase was, 3.1, 3.2 balls? You can't really ask for a lot more than what they've done tactically and technically in the last couple of games. Hey, I should explain why we're doing this so late. As I said, my room flooded, and it's been a bit of a mess. So I'm no longer in Antigua. We had to fly here, and everyone's very generously waited for me to have Wi-Fi and a room that isn't underwater.
It was the least we could do. Neil Varani moves us on to our next topic and asks, should we have cared more about teams being rained out of the tournament after Peter Boren's tears in 2016? This is obviously in reference to the Netherlands' exit a couple of years ago, where their washed-out game, they played one game, lost to Bangladesh, I think it was, washed-out game against Oman, and then a couple of years of preparation is gone.
Yes. We're not learning the lessons, are we? Rain does happen. It happens pretty much everywhere, yeah?
Yeah.
And so you can't be too clever, but it would be... Well, you know what I'm going to say. I wonder if these questions are just designed to goad me into saying we should have grounds with roofs, because I'm a very, very dull man. And I've just repeated that same sort of mantra again, but I do think it would be hugely beneficial. They've got one in Melbourne that they play the Big Bash games at, and they have played internationals there in the past. But I think we should look at that, and I think we should also look at the scheduling. And yeah, it sometimes doesn't seem to matter to people until it's their team that is knocked out. But remember, Australia were effectively knocked out in the T20 World Cup of 2022, which they hosted because of the poor weather, because they were hosting it in October. And it seems a bit high risk to be doing exactly the same thing again in 2028. But, we're always trying to shoehorn things into the schedule, and this seems to be the competition that is forced to make way. It's a worry. So there are various things that could be done, but, you could have reserve days with a little bit of planning, couldn't you? You really could. And here in particular, I think that will make quite a big difference in the Caribbean, I mean. Not so much in England, maybe, where sometimes... basically, I haven't been there for a few weeks, obviously, but it basically started raining in England in September, October, and we're now in June, and it hasn't really stopped, has it?
So the guy, I'm not going to take weather forecasts from the guy in St Lucia. Sorry, but
I'm sunburned a little bit.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm genuinely not even listening to you. So I think. Yeah, it's improving. I know the point you're trying to make. Can I make perhaps a unpopular opinion that rain and cricket isn't all bad? Yes, it's terrible if matches continually go, and what's happened in Lord Hill has been pretty. We can perhaps address that separately. But I think what it does do is that don't tell me that what happened on Saturday wasn't dramatic because of it. The drama was massively dialed up by the fact that there was potential rain and England were dancing around it. I think it also the best teams are adaptable and they accommodate. They let's say we talked about England changing their 11 and bringing in more death bowlers and bringing in Sam Curran, etc. I think it's not all bad.
Look, you make a point. I don't think anyone would mind if they never went to a rained off game again.
Yes, okay, that's fair.
Because if people have prepared and spent a lot of money, and teams are prepared as well, they prepare for these competitions for many months, and then you come and you don't really get a fair chance to express your skills. But you're right about the adaptability point. Of course you are. Look, we all know that the Indian men's side hasn't won a global competition since 2013, and let's remember the circumstances of that. It was meant to be a 50-over game. It turned into a T20, and I think England's top 2 or 3 included Alistair Cook and Jonathan Trott for a T20 at Edgbaston. And, India adapted better. But you could argue, and obviously I wouldn't because I cannot be bothered to mute Twitter for a week, that India were reliant on the English weather for their last global tournament victory. But that would obviously just be insane.
I think you don't need to be too worried about being clipped up by the wider internet. Your biggest worry is being clipped up by your own company.
That is the truth. But I know how grateful for you are that I'm taking all this risk with sunburn, so you don't have to.
Absolutely. And the sandbags, they only soften the blow, only so much. Both literally.
And I drank. I swam back from a floating bar in Antigua a couple of days ago. And if you had seen how much I drank, the risks I take for you guys.
Yeah, we're going to have to get to the last question, George. I'm sorry. And Mike asks, in reference to that Scotland-Australia game that Joss Butler couldn't watch. What could Scotland have done better to get over the line, he asks.
I think that Scotland have done really well, and they have now gone home with a lot of credit. And I think they've shown they deserve greater opportunity. And I hope that England are one of those sides that shows more respect and just tries to nurture them a little bit more. So that's the first thing I'd say. They actually did really well. And secondly, Australia are a really good side. I mean, there were in the last 6 or so overs of the Scotland innings, I think in the last 6 overs they scored 40. I mean, look how many Australia scored in the last 6 or 7 of theirs. I think in the last 7 I said it was 90. So in both crucial phases, Australia were better. Obviously, Scotland also dropped a couple of catches. I mean, there was the sole one, a knock-on, you might call it, in the last over. And Jones dropped one earlier, didn't he?
Yeah, Michael, yeah.
Those are big moments, but equally, Australia dropped 6. So it felt like a massive missed opportunity for Scotland. And I'm sure that they'll be thinking that on the way home. But, they're playing a very good side. And I thought they gave a really good account of themselves in that game and all the games. So I hope that they're not beating themselves up too badly, because I think they're making progress as a side, pretty obviously. Quite a lot of those players, fair few of them will be able to continue playing for a while. I don't know. They feel like a feel-good story to me, despite not getting to the Super 8s. I hope that doesn't feel like it's patronising, but again, I would love to see a sort of 4 or 5 nations, whatever it was, which I say again, I know there's already a lot of cricket in the calendar, God knows I know that, but you could play it maybe over a bank holiday weekend. No, you really could. You could start on Friday night, you could play 2 games on Saturday. Would you need 2 on Sunday and finish it off on the bank holiday Monday? Couldn't you? And wouldn't that be quite fun?
It sounds like way too good an idea for cricket to actually do. So yeah, it sounds fun. Sounds terrific. But yeah.
Well, I guess the TV companies can't be that interested, but it seems to me like it could be. It could, you could develop it on some rivalry around the different supporters. I don't know. I just think it was a win-win for everybody.
Yeah. No, absolutely. You've got those kind of rivalries already there, and you've got the narratives are kind of already, they're kind of baked in already. Like there's no selling point here. You can quite easily sell England versus Scotland even if they've never played each other in a bilateral T20.
Well, and Ireland and Netherlands, and maybe you could argue in due course it would encourage Wales, because I'm not sure that Glamorgan's worked. But correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe it would work better if the model was Wales rather than Glamorgan.
Let's throw forward quickly before we sign off to Super 8s. Obviously, England have got their 3 games coming up later in the week, or relatively tightly packed together as well. What's your kind of sense of, firstly, how the team is? I think you've spoken quite positively about them, and just generally what that group looks like from your perspective.
They've genuinely trained well all tour. Sorry, try not to sneeze. They've trained well all tour. They've looked more together and more energetic. Now, you can't read masses into this stuff, but it's also not irrelevant. And I have said that quite consistently, haven't I, since the start? Even if they've been knocked out, I'd have said, they are looking quite good in training. I mean, I think having Jofra Archer back is massive. I think it would be hard to exaggerate how important that is. But there's no way around it. They've beaten 2 sides who are associates, and they haven't beaten any sides that aren't yet. So in a way, the tournament starts for them now. And they've got 2 real tough games coming up. West Indies on Wednesday and South Africa Friday. So then I suspect that tomorrow will be the last day, Tuesday will be the last day they train for the next 3 games. And it's going to come thick and fast. So the next week defines, I think if they make it to the semis, I think most of us would accept that's a good result. From there, anything can happen, but it's a good result, I think, if you get to the semis. And if they don't, it'll be a bit disappointing, but let's see what happens. It looks like a good wicket, a good batting wicket. I think England are a good batting wicket side. I think that bodes well. I think West Indies are too, though. So I think it will be quite a high-scoring encounter. And I don't know the shape of the England side, but I would be a little bit surprised if Liam Livingstone played. I mean, they're saying he's got a pain in his side. I mean, I don't. Do you recover from pain in the side in 2 days? Can you go into a game potentially with a role as a bowler, needing to throw from the boundary? I'd be surprised. He batted in the nets today, then went for treatment apparently at the team hotel. I'd be a bit surprised if he played, and that's a blow. But Sam Curran could come in, not exactly the same job, not exactly, he's not as good a batter, is he? But it's not hugely dissimilar. Reasonably confident Jacks will come back in at 3. And then they've got some decisions to make over the bowling. I suspect they've got a decision to make over whether Jordan or Wood plays. We're at the ground where Wood sort of announced his second coming as an international cricketer.
Yeah.
Bowled at the speed of light here in 2019. But whether that's relevant, I don't know who bowls at the death if Jordan doesn't play. Maybe you could say Curran takes on that role, but obviously he's had a tough few months. But I've written about him in today's piece, and you can have a read.